Asthma is a major global health concern affecting millions of people worldwide and placing a significant burden on individuals, families, and societies. Asthma affects over 350 million people worldwide. It is one of the most common chronic diseases, and its prevalence is rising, particularly in low and middle income countries. Asthma is the leading cause of chronic illness in children, with many experiencing symptoms from a young age. In some regions, asthma rates have increased sharply in recent decades. Every breath we take is a gift, something most of us never think twice about. But for over 300 million people worldwide, breathing isn't effortless, it's a daily battle. This is the world of asthma, a chronic respiratory condition that affects people of all ages, races, and walks of life. In this documentary, we explore the science behind asthma, its impact on families and communities, and the latest breakthroughs, offering hope for the future. Through personal stories, expert insights, and powerful visuals, we aim to shed light on what it really means to live with asthma and why awareness and action are more important now more than ever. Today, two young ladies share their stories with us. Here's their journey while living with asthma.
My name is Ninoska Marquez, and I am 29 years old.
Nice to meet you, Ninoska. Thank you for interviewing with us today. So, if you're ready, we can get started.
Yes.
Okay. When were you first diagnosed with asthma?
Around 22 years old.
Around 22 years old. And what were some of the first signs or symptoms that made you suspect you might have asthma?
Difficulty breathing, wheezing, and I would say like difficulty sleeping.
Mhm. Okay. And can you describe your experience the first time you had an asthma attack?
So at times it was kind of difficult to know the difference between asthma and anxiety. Because once I would start to have some difficulties breathing, I would get anxious. But I ended up, I guess, knowing that it was asthma when like the wheezing would come in and it wouldn't go away right away, and then it would stay a few days.
How has asthma affected your daily life, your working life, you being a mother? How has that affected your life, or has it affected your life in any way?
I think definitely having to slow down. You know, you're at this constant fast pace, and then you're like, okay, hold on. Let me catch my breath. I'm doing too much, or I'm starting to feel lightheaded, or because I definitely get that feeling of where, like, you know, how, like, if you're like upside down, like you feel like all that blood's in your head. So sometimes I feel like that. Um, so I say, like, slowing down, trying to take a few deep breaths, eating better.
Mm, okay. And has there been any limitations or changes you face because of your asthma in your daily life?
Yes, physical activities. Definitely, because I used to, it's not been like a little bit over a year, but when I would like play sports, it'd be really quick where I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm out of breath, or I feel like I've exhausted myself pretty quickly, and I could feel like my heart racing. So I couldn't really, even though I didn't physically feel tired, my body was like, okay, slow down.
Mm,
So it affected it in that sense.
okay. And so touched on it a little bit earlier, but you are a new mother. You're still very young. Is there anything you would like to share with people your age that are living with asthma currently?
Yes, I would say look out for like early warning signs because I didn't know I had asthma until I was like 22. So for a pretty good amount of time, I had a lot of difficulty breathing during activities, and I just thought like, oh, maybe like I'm not as athletic, but that was not the case. And then now older, it's like still take care of yourself, seek out some type of support. You know, it doesn't have to necessarily always be medical, but like I said, like acupuncture therapy, things to help you kind of just unwind and stress and not hold all that tension. Because that's another thing. If you have like a lot of tension in your body and you have like all these like knots, it becomes hard for you to breathe. And I believe those types of things cause like medical issues like asthma. So I would say definitely look out for those warning signs and trying to take care of yourself.
Yeah. Thank you for that. It was a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing your journey while living with asthma.
So, how old were you when you first got diagnosed with asthma? And talk to me a little bit about like your mind process and like what you were kind of going through at the time.
I was first diagnosed with asthma whenever I was 24. When I first found out, it was a bit of a shock. But ever since being diagnosed, I have been having a better quality of life because I considered my life to be normal before that. I didn't realize walking up the stairs with a thing of laundry, I shouldn't get out of breath, or if we're talking for long periods of time on the phone. So once I found out, I've been doing so much better. I've been able to be more active when it comes to taking my dogs for the walk. I've been able to do yoga and exercise, and
And I can only imagine like how that must have been initially. But how about talk to me a little bit about how your life was previously from becoming diagnosed with asthma?
before, um, it was hard, but because of being able to do that, I can also run around with my daughter and play in the yard and not have an asthma attack or be like, hey, slow down. I'm way too out of shape for this. Before I was diagnosed with asthma, I would visit the doctor regularly because I knew something was wrong. Since I've been diagnosed with asthma, I haven't had the need to go see a doctor. I've been able to do preventative measures and take my medication to prevent asthma attacks and all that fun stuff. If you have similar situations where you suddenly get breathless out of nowhere, or you find yourself talking on the phone for a long period and you're huffing and puffing, or something just doesn't seem right, I would personally recommend getting it checked and going through the process, and then you can take the steps to make your life much better.
My name is Dr. Gerard Torino. I'm an attending physician in the Department of Medicine. Asthma is a more complex lung disease than people realize. For instance, asthmatic patients have airway obstruction, inflammation, and twitchy, or what we call hyperresponsive airways. All of these components must be treated to ensure that your asthma does not get worse. It's very important for you to identify triggers that may aggravate your asthma. Examples of triggers include allergens, respiratory infections, irritants such as tobacco smoke, cold air, and hormonal fluctuations in women. As most people know, anxiety can worsen symptoms as well as physical activity and even some medications such as beta blockers. Of course, there are other factors like gastroesophageal reflux disease, which we call GERD, and chronic sinusitis that may be potential problems. It is very important for you to work with your doctor to identify these issues. Asthma can still make patients critically ill and even cause respiratory failure requiring a stay in the intensive care unit. But there is good news. Treating asthma properly with the right controller medications, especially anti-inflammatory agents such as inhaled steroids, will keep your asthma from getting worse in the future. If you have asthma, the important thing is to consult your doctor.
I think we've known for a while that not all asthma appears to be the same, but it's not until recently that we've actually had objective criteria for defining the groups. One of the areas where we found a lot of new information is around the Th2 cytokine pathway. Certainly in asthma, we know that these cytokines are actually upregulated but only in a percentage of the population. Probably 50% or so of the asthma population has this upregulated pathway. And with that upregulated pathway, we see an association with blood eosinophils, a cell type that is very common in all people, but increased in patients with asthma. And we find that increases in these blood eosinophils, measured very simply on a complete blood count, actually track very well with the levels of these type 2 cytokines in the airways, in the blood, etc. There was a very recent and very successful trial done at UPMC on dupilumab. Dupilumab is an antibody that actually blocks activation of these type 2 cytokine pathways. So it blocks the IL-4 receptor pathway. Patients actually had the drug or the placebo added to their current treatment, and their current treatment was high-dose combination therapy, long-acting beta agonists, inhaled corticosteroids, and they had that combination of drug or placebo plus their background therapy for 4 weeks of treatment. And then at 4 weeks, their background medications were successfully withdrawn. We saw that there was a very marked reduction in protocol-defined exacerbations, or really probably loss of asthma control, which was the primary endpoint. There was an 87% reduction in that loss of asthma control. So that was the primary result. But in addition to that, there were improvements in lung function, there were improvements in symptoms, there were improvements in asthma control questionnaires, there were improvements in beta agonist use, and these occurred over the first 4 weeks of the trial when the patients actually were still on their background medication, so on top of their current medication, but then were sustained over withdrawal of their background medication. So the next study is already ongoing with dupilumab. It is a 12-week study with a 12-week extension of that, and it is a dose-ranging study. Future research studies are going to need to focus a little bit more on what is the right dosing, what is the right population of patients. We had a very select group of patients in this clinical trial. They had to have a certain threshold of blood eosinophils. But we don't know how low one could actually go and get similar results. I think physicians need to know that there is some hope for some of their more severe asthma patients out there, that there are drugs that are being targeted to a certain type of inflammation, which at least in preliminary studies seem to be very successful in improving asthma-related outcomes.
For millions around the globe, each breath is a battle, young and old alike. For decades, it was managed, not cured, controlled, not conquered. But today, the tide is turning. Driven by cutting-edge science and bold innovation, researchers and doctors are reimagining how we treat asthma, from bronchial thermoplasty, which is a rare treatment that targets inflammation at the molecular level, to smart inhalers that track symptoms in real time. Medicine is making giant leaps. Personalized treatments, once a dream, are becoming reality. And with each breakthrough, we get closer to a world where asthma no longer limits lives. Let's take a look at how some of these treatments work. Bronchial thermoplastic is a medical procedure used to treat severe asthma that doesn't respond well to traditional medications. It involves the use of a catheter, which is inserted into the airways of the lungs via a bronchoscope, to deliver controlled heat to the smooth muscles of the bronchial tubes. The heat reduces the amount of smooth muscle in the airways, making them less likely to constrict and cause asthma symptoms such as wheezing and shortness of breath. Procedure is typically performed in 3 sessions, spaced a few weeks apart. It's intended for patients with severe asthma who continue to experience symptoms despite taking inhaled corticosteroids and other asthma medications. The ultimate goal is to improve asthma control, reduce the frequency of severe asthma attacks, and decrease the need for emergency treatment or hospitalization. However, it is not a cure for asthma, and the effects can take time to manifest. In a world where innovation meets healthcare, a new breed of medical device is quietly transforming the lives of millions. The smart inhaler. Devices like Propeller Health and Adherium uses Bluetooth-enabled inhalers to track medication use, monitor symptoms, and provide real-time feedback. This data is helping doctors better manage asthma and adjust treatments. Each time the user takes a puff, the inhaler records vital data, the time, the dose, and whether the device was used correctly. With sensors and Bluetooth connectivity, this information is instantly transmitted to a smartphone app or cloud-based system.
Asthma affects millions of lives worldwide, yet many still struggle to access the care they need. The time to act is now. You have the power to make a change. Educate yourself and others, advocate for better healthcare policies, and support organizations dedicated to asthma research and treatments. Visit aafa.org to find resources to help those living with asthma. An AAFA advocate is someone who stands up for those with asthma and allergies. Research is an important part for the pursuit of better health. Through research, we gain better understanding of illnesses and diseases, new medicines, ways to improve quality of life, as well as cures. The AAFA works with our community and other stakeholders to help shape laws and regulations that affect people with asthma and allergies. Priority issues vary from year to year, but in general include the following key priorities: access to healthcare, access to medications, climate and health, food allergies, healthy settings, health disparities, as well as federal funding. By donating, you help to save and improve the lives of millions of people affected by asthma and allergies. There are several ways you can support the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America in its mission to provide education and support to patients and families living with asthma and allergies. You can make a donation, fundraise for AAFA, take action in May for Asthma and Allergy Awareness Month, become an AAFA ambassador, and join a community to get the help and support you need. Together, we can breathe easier and fight asthma one step at a time.